Nice launch trajectory countdown net. Pad is clear.
10, 9, 8.
Launch auto sequence has started.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go for launch.
Vehicle is supersonic. Stage separation confirmed. Dragon, separation confirmed. Stage 1 is transonic. Landing legs have deployed. And Falcon 9 has landed.
On your screen is a live view of Falcon 9 awaiting its 2:13 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Today's launch is for our customer OneWeb, a connectivity wholesaler that delivers high-speed, low-latency connectivity solutions to telecommunications companies, internet service providers, local governments, businesses, and communities everywhere. Hello everyone, my name is Yome Zo, and I'm a propulsion engineer here at SpaceX. Thanks for joining the OneWeb Launch 17 mission, which marks our 215th overall mission to date. As the mission name suggests, this is OneWeb's 17th overall launch and third with SpaceX. Similar to our previous launches with OneWeb, today's launch will also send 40 OneWeb satellites into low Earth orbit, bringing their LEO constellation to 582 satellites in orbit. Today, we will deploy OneWeb satellites in 3 different deployment sequences. And as a note, if we lose ground station coverage during parts of any deployment sequence, we will confirm deployment of satellites that were scheduled to deploy once we gain connection at a different ground station. If you're interested in reviewing the full deployment sequence, check out spacex.com. And here at just under T-minus 12 minutes, the weather, range, and vehicle are all go for launch. If for some reason we do not launch today, we do have a backup opportunity on Friday, March 10th at 2:08 p.m. Eastern Time. And with that, let's learn a little bit more about OneWeb and today's mission.
Think for a moment about what connectivity brings you. Is it helping you manage or grow a business, stay in contact with family and friends? Is it giving you or your family access to education or to a doctor? Is it opening doors for you to a world beyond your horizon? Of course, for many of us in big cities and large and established communities, it's doing that every day. It's essential, fundamental, it's enabling our lives. From connectivity flows a better quality of life, new horizons, and greater opportunities. So what can we do to help ensure everybody can experience the benefits of connectivity? This is the OneWeb mission, to bridge that digital divide, to serve businesses and rural communities, to further scientific understanding and collaboration. And we're doing this by bringing high-speed broadband internet from space to places where this opportunity was previously unimaginable. Every customer connected via the OneWeb network has their own story. All of them are united by one thing: gaining the power of connectivity and the independence or sense of community that can bring.
OneWeb, we are a global connectivity provider powered by satellites to connect the unconnected globally. And we are doing this with a low Earth orbit constellation of 648 satellites. We run satellites 30 times closer to the Earth than traditional satellites. We do this because we can deliver high-speed connectivity to be hundreds of megabits per second, delivered to a single user terminal. Connectivity is highly concentrated around densely populated areas. OneWeb really wants to bring connectivity to remote places. With a satellite constellation, we can reach everyone, everywhere, effectively bringing on a level playing field all of these people that have been left behind.
water is life, but connectivity is everything else, right? It's education, it's healthcare, it's being able to start your own small business. I mean, just look at all the stuff you do on a day-to-day basis in an urban environment, and think if that's cut off for even a few hours, how anxious you get. There's over 300 communities in Canada that we think will never. They're satellite communities. We don't think they'll ever have connectivity going in. They're just too far away to run fiber. They're too far away to get 4G or 5G. The only option for them will be satellite internet.
I'm taking classes to get my bachelor's degree in administration in the early childhood field. With the internet, it's made it a lot easier. I can see my professors during class. I can collaborate with my classmates.
OneWeb has helped in a lot of ways. It's more convenient for us, like ordering supplies and payments over the phone.
It is great to work with SpaceX. They are a fantastic partner. It's been very nice and exciting to start working with them and OneWeb.
We're really looking forward to the launch with SpaceX. It's very important for us.
With liftoff just under 8 minutes from now, let's get to know a little bit more about the rocket on your screen. Hey everyone, I'm Atticus Federa, and I'm a propulsion engineer here at SpaceX, and I'm excited to join Yome to bring you live coverage for today's launch. On your screen is a live view of our Falcon 9 vehicle. Falcon 9 is a two-stage rocket which stands 230 feet or 70 meters tall, which is roughly 20 meters taller than the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, France, which is about 40 meters tall. When it's fully fueled, the Falcon 9 will hold just over 1 million pounds of propellant that the vehicle will mostly burn through in less than 3 minutes after liftoff. And we began loading those propellants on both stages of the vehicle at just about T-minus 35 minutes.
Engine chill has started.
Good call out there for the engine chill on M1D's beginning. Now, starting from the top of our rocket, we have our payload fairing, which safely encloses the 17-foot diameter fairing, which is the structure at the very top of the rocket. Now, this structure protects the satellites from aerodynamic heating, loads, and contamination during ascent. And once we reach the vacuum of space, we will actually jettison these fairing halves while the second stage continues to its final destination in low Earth orbit. And just below that payload fairing, we have the second stage. That's the stage that will take the 40 OneWeb satellites to a low Earth orbit today. That second stage will ignite its single Merlin vacuum, or MVAC engine, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, and then it will relight for a second time.
Stage 1, RP1 load is complete.
Good call out there. We just finished loading RP1 on the first stage. Below that second stage, we have the interstage, which is actually part of the first stage. And as you can see on your screen, the carbon fiber interstage is a distinct black color because it is unpainted TPS, or thermal protection system. Now, this protects the composite material that the interstage is made out of. At the very bottom of the first stage, there are 9 Merlin 1D engines that will get Falcon 9 off the ground and up into the thinner parts of the Earth's atmosphere. And shortly after liftoff, the first and second stages will physically separate from one another, and then the second stage will continue to orbit, while the first stage will start making its way back down to Earth. The first stage is designed to be reflown multiple times with minimal refurbishment between flights. And today's first stage will actually be flying for the 13th time and will be attempting to land at landing zone 1, which is not too far from the launch pad. On your screen right now is a live view of that landing zone. And if we are successful in recovering the booster today, it will mark the 177th successful recovery of an orbital class rocket. And lastly, that large
tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
That large truss structure you see there is the transporter erector, or TE. We use it to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position. Now, the TE also routes the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and the satellites, and this is until Falcon 9 goes on internal power and clears the pad. At liftoff,
strong back retract has started.
Good call out there. We are beginning to retract that strong back. And we do move it away to clear the way for Falcon 9's ascent.
And while we're waiting for TE retraction, we'll see the clamp arms just below the fairing halves. You can see them starting to open right now. And following the clamp arms opening, the TE will begin to pull away from the rocket slightly. And then at T0, the ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE even further away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off. You can see those clamp arms opening there just below the fairing. Now the first stage is connected to a launch mount at the base of the transporter erector, but the structure is hinged, so it will retract away from the vehicle in preparation for launch. You heard that call out earlier for the strong back retraction sequence beginning, but here in just a few seconds you should see that strong back begin to actually recline away from Falcon 9. We are waiting for TE retraction, and it's a beautiful day in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Now at this point in the countdown, you just heard
Stage 1 POGO.
You heard the call out that Stage 1 LOX load is complete, and Stage 2 LOX loading should finish up just about a minute later at T-minus 2 minutes. At which point both the first and second stages will be fully loaded with about 1 million pounds of kerosene and liquid oxygen. Now those white clouds that you see forming around the Falcon are expected. We do begin to vent the chilled gas above the LOX tank liquid surface to maintain the pressures that we need. And you can see around the first and second stages that as we load that super chilled liquid oxygen, it is causing condensation and clouds to form in the humid Florida air. Second stage LOX loading should be completing here shortly. And at T-minus 60 seconds.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
There is that call out for Stage 2 LOX loading complete. And at T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup. So this means the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers will take over the launch countdown. And just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we light the Merlin 1D engines
Launch gas, close that.
for liftoff. The OneWeb Launch 17 payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather is looking green, and the range is ready to support today's launch. We do have a backup opportunity tomorrow, March 10th at 2:08 p.m., but we are proceeding into the final minute of terminal count.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
LD, go for launch.
We have that final go for launch. All systems are go for launch on Falcon 9 with the OneWeb Launch 17 mission payload.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just full power. And liftoff, OneWeb 3.
Vehicle switching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Nominal power and telemetry.
Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral, carrying the OneWeb Launch 17 payload. Now we're still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad. And coming up in just a few seconds here, we will be approaching the point of max Q. There we go, call out for that there. At the point of max Q, we throttle the Merlin 1D engines down briefly to reduce the loads on the vehicle. We've now throttled the engines back up to full power, and this will help us continue to accelerate towards low Earth orbit. The rocket typically needs to go about 17,500 miles per hour.
MVAC engine chill has started.
Good call out there for MVAC engine chill. We need to go about 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and actually get into orbit. So keep an eye on that stage 1 telemetry at the bottom of your screen. Now coming up, we're going to have 5 events in very quick succession. Those are main engine cutoff, or MECO, stage separation, stage 1 flip, second engine start 1, boost back burn, and then from there, the fairing halves will separate. So keep an eye out for those events. Again, starting with main engine cutoff, coming up on that point in just about 15 seconds here, so let's listen in for that.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition. Stage 1 boost back startup.
And there you go. You just heard and saw main engine cutoff, stage separation, stage 1 flip, and second engine start 1. Now we are in the middle of the boost back burn, which you can see on the left side of your screen there. That first stage has flipped around and is burning 3 of its Merlin 1D engines to head back towards the launch site, while the MVAC on the right is pushing the second stage into low Earth orbit. Now today's mission is what we call a RTLS, or return to launch site. And that's actually where we return the first stage back to a landing pad that is actually very close to where we took off from. Now this burn should last about 50 seconds, so we have about 10 seconds left in the boost back burn. Both stages continue to look nominal.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
And there we go, just had confirmation of successful boost back burn shutdown. Coming up next in just a few seconds, we will separate those fairing halves and should get a good view of our payload.
Fairing separation confirmed.
There we go, just had successful confirmation of boost back burn end and the successful separation of both the fairing halves from the second stage. Now both of these halves on today's mission are flying for the 6th time, and we will be attempting to retrieve them again today once they fall back to Earth using our recovery vessel, Bob.
We're just about at T plus a little over 4 minutes into today's mission, and we are in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns before satellite deployment. Now at T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds, so a couple minutes from now, you should see on your screen the first stage's
Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
You heard that both vehicles are on nominal trajectories. Great views from the first and second stages there. Now for the entry burn of the first stage, we do relight 3 of the M1D engines on the first stage, starting with the center E9 engine, followed shortly by the E1 and E5 engines, which are all in a row. And this slows the vehicle down as it passes into the Earth's atmosphere. Now we do the entry burn in order to slow down to reduce re-entry forces, which helps us to recover and reuse our first stage. During that entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating, firing those 3 Merlin engines, but we're still moving really rapidly, so the vehicle will actually fly through its own plume and deposit some of that carbon-based fuel soot that Falcon 9 uses onto the booster. And great views of those grid fins on the first stage. Again, the Falcon 9 first stage that is supporting today's mission will perform this entry burn for the 13th time, having previously supported multiple missions, including GPS vehicles 4 and 5, Inspiration 4, Axiom 1, Nilesat 301, and 7 separate Starlink missions. Entry burn starting here shortly.
Stage 1 entry burn, startup.
There is the start of the entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn, shutdown.
Good entry burn from the first stage.
Stage 1 FTS is safed.
The flight termination system is safe for stage 1. You can see those attitude control thrusters on the first stage firing there.
Both vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
Both first and second stages are looking good. And our next milestone is the stage 1 landing burn, which is coming all the way back to landing zone 1 in Cape Canaveral, starting in about 15 seconds here.
Stage 1 transonic.
Stage 2 FTS is safed.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Start of our stage 1 landing burn. That's great drone footage of the first stage that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. Incredible views from first stage coming down on
Stage
landing
1
zone
land and let deploy.
That was a beautiful landing.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Beautiful landing of the first stage, and there you have it. That landing marks
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
That landing marks SpaceX's 177th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including the first stage landings of Falcon 9 and Heavy. And now back to stage 2. Stage 2 is looking good with just about 10 seconds left before second engine cutoff 1.
MVAC shutdown.
Heard that call out for MVAC shutdown. We're just waiting on confirmation of a good orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
You just heard that good call out for nominal orbital insertion. But the mission isn't over yet. The second stage is now embarking on its first coast phase. Now, after this coast phase, we will relight that MVAC engine for a second time around the T plus 55-minute mark. So we'll see you back here in about 45 minutes.
We lost the signal.
Welcome back to the webcast of the Falcon 9 mission, carrying the OneWeb Launch 17 mission satellites for our customer OneWeb. Now, we've had a nominal mission so far. Falcon 9 launched on time at 2:13 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral. And we did successfully recover that first stage back on landing zone 1. This marked the 13th landing for this booster, and the second stage did complete its first burn successfully. Now we're just about 20 seconds away from the second ignition of the MVAC engine, which will carry the second stage and the OneWeb Launch 17 payload into the orbit that we need to deploy the satellites. This burn is super short and should just last a few seconds here. So coming up in just about 6 seconds, let's listen in for that second burn. Looks like we did light that second engine. We're just waiting on confirmation of...
Nominal orbit insertion.
There it is, just that confirmation of nominal orbital insertion. So great news there. The satellites are now in an orbit that is ready for deployment. So that short burn we just completed is actually meant to refine the orbital trajectory that the vehicle is following in space. And because at this point in the flight, the stage is completely above the atmosphere and mostly empty of propellant, it really doesn't take that much to get it moving. And so that's why that burn was so short. And as a reminder, the OneWeb Launch 17 mission payload is still attached to the Falcon 9's second stage. And coming up next, we have the first of 3 planned deployment sequences for the 40 total OneWeb satellites. The first set of deployments will deploy 14 satellites and is scheduled to occur in just about 2 minutes from now. And as a reminder, we may lose ground station coverage for at least 4 of the satellite deployments in this sequence. And if we do, the teams in the control room will likely confirm successful deployment when we reach our next ground station as we orbit the Earth. Now, after completing that second MVAC burn, we are in a circular orbit about 600 kilometers above the Earth's surface, traveling about 27,000 kilometers per hour or 17,000 miles per hour. Earlier in the mission, you might have noticed that large MVAC nozzle glowing during burn 1. Now, this actually happens because the nozzle converts some of the heat of the engine's exhaust into visible light. And this is just one of the many methods that a rocket engine can use to deal with extreme heat. As you can imagine, the exhaust from the MVAC is incredibly hot. If you're just joining us, welcome to our webcast for the OneWeb Launch 17 mission. So far, we have had a nominal mission with liftoff at 2:13 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. We had a successful recovery of the first stage for the 13th time on this booster, and so far, Stage 2 has completed 2 burns. And in just about 20 seconds or so, we should be coming up on the beginning of the first payload deployment sequence. As a reminder, OneWeb is a connectivity wholesaler that provides connectivity solutions at scale in pursuit of bridging the digital divide around the world. Today's mission marks OneWeb's 17th overall launch, and it will bring their LEO constellation to 582 satellites in space. Now, it's just about 20 seconds until the first set of satellites begin to deploy. Let's listen into the nets and keep our eyes open.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 1 and Alpha 5, separation confirmed.
And there we go, confirmation of successful deployment of OneWeb Sat A1 and A5. Looks like we did get some live video coverage of that.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 4 and Alpha 8, separation confirmed.
Good news there, we did just separate another 2 OneWeb satellites, A4 and A8. Our next payload deploy should be coming up in just about 45 seconds or so. So far, we have deployed 4 out of the total 40 OneWeb satellites. And as a reminder, we have 14 total deployments in this particular sequence, so that leaves us 10 more satellites to deploy. And also, just as a reminder, the last 4 satellites may happen in the blackout period where we do not have ground station coverage, but we will confirm successful deployment of those on our next connection to a ground station.
OneWeb, Sat Bravo 1 and Bravo 5, separation confirmed.
There we go. 2 more OneWeb satellites, B1 and B5, have been separated. Getting some really cool views here of these payloads as they float off into space.
OneWeb, Sat Charlie 1 and Charlie 5, separation confirmed.
There go the next 2, C1 and C5, have successfully deployed. Should be another 20 seconds or so until the next payload deploy.
OneWeb, Sat Alpha 2 and Alpha 6, separation confirmed.
There we go. 2 more satellites deployed there. Got a great shot of those satellites floating off into space. A2 and A6 have successfully deployed. So our next set of satellites should be deployed in just about a minute or so, but the next 2 deployments are expected to be in an area of blackout, so we may not get coverage of them in this particular sequence. So far in this sequence, we have successfully deployed 10 out of the 14 satellites, and so just waiting on those next 4, but we may not get confirmation of those last 4 until a little bit later in the mission.
OneWeb, Sat Bravo 4 and Bravo 8, separation confirmed.
Looks like we did actually have coverage of OneWeb satellites B4 and B8 deployments. So that leaves just 1 more set of satellites to be deployed in this sequence. So far, we have deployed successfully 12 out of the 14 OneWeb satellites currently planned for this deployment sequence. Looks like we have just about another minute before we deploy that last pair of satellites for this particular sequence. On your screen is a live view of the payload adapter. It's at the very top of the second stage. You can see those OneWeb satellites attached all throughout it. And that glowing dot off in the background is actually one of the previous satellites that we just deployed in this sequence. Should be deploying that last pair of satellites in about 30 seconds, but we may lose ground station coverage.
expected loss of signal molded.
And as expected, we did get LOS, or loss of signal, before we were able to confirm successful deployment of the last 2 satellites in this deployment sequence. We were able to confirm deployment of 12 of 14 of those satellites in this group. And as I mentioned earlier, we should be able to confirm successful deployment of the other 2 satellites when we reach the next ground station. Now, our second deployment sequence is scheduled to start around T+1 hour and 14 minutes, but we likely won't have ground station coverage until about 3 minutes after that. So as I mentioned earlier, if we are able to regain ground station coverage earlier than we expect, we'll be sure to provide live views, so stay tuned for that. But for now, we'll plan to come back to you live around the T+1 hour and 17-minute mark, so sit back and enjoy the space views.
Welcome back to the OneWeb Launch 17 mission webcast. So far, we've had a nominal mission with an on-time liftoff, first stage landing, 2 second stage burns, and successful deployment confirmation from 12 OneWeb satellites. We did have LOS just before the last 2 deployments in the first deployment sequence, so we are still waiting for confirmation on those. During this blackout period, we also should have started our second payload deployment sequence around the T+1 hour and 14-minute mark. Once we regain connection to our second stage shortly, our operators on console should be able to confirm the satellites that deployed during the blackout period, and we should be able to bring you live views of the rest of the satellites set to deploy in this sequence.
Acquisition of signal, Svalbard.
9 OneWeb satellite separations confirmed.
There you just heard confirmation of 9 satellite deployments confirmed. So that includes the 2 satellites from the first set of deployments.
OneWeb Sat Delta 4 and Delta 8 separation confirmed.
There you had confirmation of another 2 satellites deployed. So we did get confirmation of the 2 satellites from the last deployment sequence, as well as 9 deployments from this sequence, including the one we just called out. We have 4 more satellites in this deployment sequence of 13 satellites, with the next set deploying in just about 20 seconds.
OneWeb Sat Delta 3 and Delta 7 separation confirmed.
Great news, you see Delta 3 and Delta 7 satellites have successfully deployed. Final 2 satellites in this deployment sequence in just about 10 seconds here.
OneWeb Sat Charlie 2 and Charlie 6 separation confirmed.
Great confirmation of satellites C2 and C6. And those are the last 2 satellites of the second deployment sequence. With those last 2 satellites, that confirms successful deployment of all 13 satellites in this second deployment. And so far, we have successfully deployed 27 of 40 total satellites on today's mission. Our third and final payload deployment sequence should begin around the T+1 hour and 29-minute mark, but we likely won't have ground station coverage until 3 minutes after the third deployment sequence begins. Now again, if we're able to connect to a different ground station earlier, we'll be sure to bring you real-time views of deployment, but we'll see you again in a few minutes.
Acquisition of signal, Lily.
ever look at a rocket from Mars and you just boggle the mind and the technology caught up to them.
OneWeb, Sat Echo 3 and Echo 7, separation confirmed.
Hello again, and welcome back to the OneWeb Launch 17 mission webcast. Although we were expecting to start this final deployment sequence in the dark, it looks like we were able to gain connection to our ground station in Kodiak. Now, we may lose connection to this ground station in the middle of the deployment sequence, but should be able to regain connection around the T+1 hour and 32-minute mark. So let's tune in to watch these last satellites deploy from the second stage. And we did earlier have confirmation of successful deployment of E3 and E7 satellites.
OneWeb, Sat Bravo 3, separation confirmed.
More good news there, just successfully deployed OneWeb satellite B3. Coming up in about 10 seconds or so, we should be deploying the next two satellites.
OneWeb, Sat Delta 1 and Delta 5, separation confirmed.
There we go. As you just heard, we did successfully deploy satellites D1 and D5. As expected, we did lose our ground station coverage in the middle of this deployment sequence. There it is, you just heard that announcement. So we will be deploying another satellite here in the dark, and we will have confirmation of this deployment and the next one once we regain coverage.
OneWeb, Sat Echo 8, separation confirmed.
Looks like we did have coverage of that satellite, so just confirmed the separation of the E8.
OneWeb, Sat Echo 4, separation confirmed.
And there we go, successful confirmation of separation of OneWeb satellite E4. As a reminder, OneWeb is a connectivity wholesaler that provides connectivity solutions at scale in pursuit of bridging the digital divide around the world. Today's mission marks OneWeb's 17th overall launch and will bring their LEO constellation to 582 satellites in space.
Acquisition of signals, Vandy.
Now, so far, we do have 34 out of the 40 satellites deployed. And coming up in just about 5 seconds or so, we should have the next set of satellites deploying.
OneWeb, Sat Delta 2 and Delta 6, separation confirmed.
And there they go. Satellite D2 and D6 have deployed. Got some great views of them floating into space there. That brings our total to 36 deployments. With only 4 left in the mission. We should be deploying the next set in just under a minute. Got some really cool views of space here. Our second stage hanging out. If you take a look at the telemetry in the bottom of your screen, we're still traveling at 27,000 kilometers per hour at an altitude of 600 kilometers above the surface of the Earth.
OneWeb, Sat Echo 2, and Echo 6, separation confirmed.
There we go. 2 more OneWeb satellites have successfully been deployed. That was satellite E2 and E6. Now, coming up in about 20 seconds, we will have the final 2 satellites deploying. Currently sitting at 38 out of 40 deployments.
OneWeb, Sat Echo 1, and Echo 5, separation confirmed. 40 OneWeb spacecraft separations confirmed.
And with that call out, we can confirm successful deployment of all 40 OneWeb satellites, which will wrap up our coverage for today.
All of us here at SpaceX want to give a big thank you to our customer OneWeb for entrusting us with today's mission. We also want to give a shout out to the Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's launch. Today's launch includes our 215th overall SpaceX mission to date and 16th launch of the year. And to all of our viewers, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.